Beatles, okay, start again, cut. Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The Blue album pretty much captures the best of the more experimental Beatles after their initial pop phase, when they became the sort of pioneering artists that they're now legendary for.
Generally speaking, the songs became more interesting as the Beatles' lives became more complicated themselves.
It will live well beyond the idea that it's 60s music.
They left world champions.
They made it look so easy.
I'm very certain they'll be playing Beatle music 200 years from today.
Get back to where you once belonged. Get back to where you once belonged.
With Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, The White Album and Abbey Road, probably the best 5 albums ever recorded by any band ever in the world, and I can't see anyone actually ever matching it.
The Blue Album contains stuff from what I would call their classical period. I tend to think that the Beatles were probably at their best when they were at their most pretentious.
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to strawberry fields. Nothing is real, and nothing to get hung about. Strawberry fields forever.
Strawberry Fields Forever is one of the better of the best tracks. It was inspired by Lennon's sort of childhood or youthful memories of going with his auntie to Strawberry Fields, which was a kind of Salvation Army orphanage building. It's influenced by surrealism, and Lennon was influenced by Bob Dylan and Spike Milligan and people who messed around with language and tried it out to see how elastic it could be.
No one I think is in my tree. I mean, it must be high or low. That is, you can't, tune in, but it's all right. That is, I think it's not too bad. Let me take
Strawberry Fields Forever was a mere title. It was a kind of, it actually lifted him off the runway into a stream of consciousness, sort of abstract libretto, I suppose. And I think that he was very much sort of impressed by authors of his childhood that were like that, like Edward Lear in particular, and Lewis Carroll, and it certainly was reflected in not just his songwriting but also in his literary works, because he brought out 2 slim volumes earlier on, and in a way it was kind of a sort of articulation of the sort of things he wrote in Spaniard in the Works, or the one before, in his own right, but without much humour.
No one I think is in my tree. I mean, it must be high or low. That is, you can't, tune in, but it's all right. That is, I think it's not too bad.
What is interesting about it was there were actually 2 separate recordings of Strawberry Fields Forever, and when George Martin asked John's opinion of this, he said, well, I like the first half of that one and the second half of that one. And so somehow George Martin managed to join it up, because they were only like a semitone apart, and in fact he speeded up the end bit, and you don't actually notice the join.
Penny Lane, which was the sort of B-side or double A-side with Strawberry Fields, and what a fantastic single that must have been.
Penny Lane, there is a barber showing photographs of every head he's had the pleasure to know, and all the people that come and go.
The original intention of Sgt. Pepper, and it was something that was abandoned almost immediately, was for the Beatles to write songs that were reflective of their upbringing in Liverpool. Strawberry Fields, for example, was somewhere near where John used to live in Woolton, which was actually more Lancashire than Liverpool. And Penny Lane is an actual place nearby. Unfortunately, at the time, it was a general policy, I mean, to release a single, and I think that at the time EMI were crying out for a Beatles single, so they had to sacrifice these two tracks that were intended for Sgt. Pepper. And you wonder how Sgt. Pepper would have turned out if you know, for some reason, those numbers could have been sort of selected for it.
Sgt. Pepper, fated as the Beatles' true masterpiece. I put it down to one thing and one thing only. The Times gave it a great review. Stamp of approval. For me, bit of a smokescreen.
If you're hip, then Sgt. Pepper is not the greatest Beatles album, it's Revolver. If you're not, and I guess I'm not, then Sgt. Pepper is the sort of, I suppose, the pinnacle.
A 1, a 2, a 3.
It's not something that the Beatles themselves had tried before, the mixture of different images, sounds, styles. It really does stand as a one of a kind.
The packaging was unbelievably clever. You know, it came at you, it had the whole psychedelic swinging 60s thing about it. It just came at you, them in uniforms, the whole lot. It was just unbelievably perfect.
You had the lyrics on the sleeve. You know, this is really the first signal that, hey, when you're listening to this stuff, you should listen to the lyrics, as well as just the groove and the melody.
It was definitely a real departure. It sort of set the standard for other bands to try to come up to the same standards as what the Beatles were doing at that time. And it only came about because the Beatles, I believe, had more free time in their hands and they weren't touring anymore.
If I'd been out till 2:45, would you lock the door? Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? You'll be older too.
As a concept record, which had never been made before, yes, it was brilliant. Rubber Soul and Revolver, I think, in some ways are probably stronger records, but if you say what was their masterpiece, I would have to say it would be Sgt. Pepper's, because it also captured the era.
It's a work of exploration and experimentation. It could have sort of fallen flat on its face. Commercially speaking, I think the world was shocked by the release of Sgt. Pepper's, but within months, I think the world loved Sgt. Pepper's, and it was being hailed as a masterpiece way back then.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was inspired when Lennon asked his 3 or 4-year-old boy at that time, Julian, what his school painting or his childhood painting was. And Julian just exactly said that words. It's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which is his friend Lucy at the time. It's classic psychedelia. I mean, psychedelia has to sound late 60s or else it's not psychedelia. If it's someone imitating it in 2007, it just sounds a little bit karaoke, really. So you have to have the dated aspect to make it authentic, with the sitars and the various kind of instruments that were just coming in and were sort of fashionable at the time.
I don't think Sgt. Pepper, in terms of the actual content, was their greatest album. But it was an interesting idea, and it certainly opened the floodgates for other things. It opened the floodgates for other concept albums, rock operas, those sort of things. And it certainly made record companies begin to sort of underwrite albums rather than singles.
Nothing you can sing that can't be sung. Nothing you can say, but you can learn how to play the game. It's easy.
All You Need Is Love has such a massive sing-along chorus that it's kind of, it's very effective. It pretty much summed up the feel of the times, this kind of slightly sort of acid-addled feeling that, oh, if we all just believe in love, everything will be all right and the world will be saved, that kind of hippie ethic.
Easy.
It was necessary to include All You Need Is Love because it was a big hit, and it was released at the very height of the Summer of Love. It was a satellite-linked live performance, but I don't think it's a particularly strong song personally. It doesn't really speak to me anymore, but I think it was very much just the most appropriate song for the time, in the sense that it kind of summed up, flower power and, love and that whole sort of thing that seemed to be seeping through the entire alternative culture, if you like. But I think it only lasted as long as it was fine weather.
Riding on the coattails of Sgt. Pepper's album, it seemed the Beatles could do no wrong.
Magical Mystery Tour was sort of, some people think it's just a filler for a soundtrack sort of thing, but it's actually a really good song. People tend to just dismiss it, but it has a lot of energy, and it has a kind of rocky energy, you get in Get Back or Sgt. Pepper Reprise. And it also, with its lyrics, kind of again captures the feel of the kind of, the acid experimental generation, let's all drop whatever we're going to drop and go on a Magical Mystery Tour. And very much an anthem of its time.
I think it was important that Magical Mystery Tour had to be represented in some way, and it seemed to make sense to use the title track. It wasn't, if you boil the title track down to just a single instrument and a voice, it's not really much of a song, but nevertheless I think that it kind of summed up that particular time. I don't think that the film itself was very good. I think it was one of these sort of interesting but boring sort of projects, but the music was a winner, and I think that, you know, was reflected in the fact that it was a most unusual product. It was a double vinyl EP, and it almost but not quite topped the charts, and it was held off by Hello Goodbye, the Beatles' sort of latest single.
Everything they'd done from their first hit up till then had received everybody's praise. Magical Mystery Tour basically was the first false step where the public and all the critics could have a bit of a go at them. And the Beatles were so worried, in fact, that they had it shown again in colour about 2 weeks later. But strange enough, the damage had been done.
A lot of people said, well, it would never have happened with Brian Epstein. When Brian Epstein was alive, he wouldn't have allowed it because it was too obscure, it wasn't direct enough, etc., etc.
And it never really came across as this happy magical mystery tour that it was supposed to be. It came across as a bit of a mess.
All this mud in 45 minutes. I can hardly get my breath.
It's intake, Jessie, not output.
I am already. 3 times this week already.
For goodness sake, Jessie, sit down. Remember.
I think it was probably the first album perhaps where Paul would bring a song to the studio and it was Paul's song, and John would bring a song and it was John's song, George would bring a song. So I think the Beatles as a unit is lost on that album to some degree.
So I don't think it works as an album at all. It wasn't conceived as an album. It's a more old-fashioned notion of putting out a long player with some good songs on it and a little bit of make-weight.
I am he as you are, he as you are, me, and we are all together. See how they run like pigs from a gun, see how they fly. I'm crying.
The song I Am the Walrus, is it a paean to drug culture?
I'm the Walrus. Here we go. Let's analyse everything they ever did.
No, I don't think it's something that tries to encapsulate the drug culture of the late 60s in any way.
I would have said I Am the Walrus was more of a 2 fingers up to the powers that be rather than anything that particularly glorified drugs.
You know, if Dylan can come up with these crap lyrics that don't actually mean anything, well, we can do it intentionally. And this, as far as I understand, is exactly what Lennon was aiming for.
I am the Eggman. They are the Eggman. I am the Walrus. Mr. City Policeman sitting pretty little policeman in a row.
I Am the Walrus is very Lennon indeed. It's very kind of nasty and sneering. It's quite funny. It has loads of sort of slightly risque words for its time with sexual references which were a bit raunchy for the time. But the music's very aggressive and powerful. And yeah, it's really hard to deny that there are any drug references in this one. The drug references are fairly blatant, I guess. Lennon was very influenced by Dylan, so that sneering nasal tone he has in his voice, that kind of nasty kind of finger pointing aspect, perhaps was influenced by Dylan, who he did kind of hero worship a little bit. Whereas McCartney was more kind of influenced by classic song structure and the Beach Boys and that kind of area.
See how they fly like Lucy in the sky, see how they run. I'm crying.
The band have turned into a proper rock band by this point. The days of sort of kind of the Fab Four are long gone. The whole sort of pretty boy McCartney and the sort of hard-edged Lennon, that's all kind of dissolved into, they sort of merged more into each other. That's really, you can really see that coming through on this song in particular.
I think I Am the Walrus is a marvellous track, and I think other people think so as well. I mean, Oasis covered it later on, so did Frank Zappa, you know. I think the way you approach the lyrics depends on the individual. I mean, I think that you can sort of read things in them that perhaps aren't there. And I mean, I think that John Lennon, who was a principal composer, was aware of that, because later on the White Album, he did a song called Glass Onion, which he kind of was actually sort of being rather playful about people reading things into the lyrics. You know, he says the walrus was Paul, for example. I mean, I happen to think the walrus might have been Ringo. I don't know. But I mean, I think that the problem was that at that time, the most sort of earnest Beatles fanatics were listening to every record from start to finish. They were listening to it at different speeds. They were rigging up their dance set record players to play things backwards. And they were sort of reading oracular messages in them that were somehow going to make them a better person, more at one with the Beatles. You know, it's like examining every square inch of the Sgt. Pepper cover. And apparently on Magical Mystery Tour, somebody found a number, and it looked like a telephone number, and some journalist was being driven mad by Beatles fans phoning up from the States, you know, Australia, you know, trying to see if it was actually, you know, a number that was to do with them. I mean, you know, it was almost like, I don't know, you know, a hobby of collecting Beatles records had suddenly turned into an obsession, almost a religion, if you like. And it, you know, and that was particularly so during that sort of Sgt. Pepper, All You Need Is Love, Magical Mystery Tour period. After that, I think that, you know, people started to realise that the four individuals in the group were rather more mortal than that.
What a great video they did with it in Magical Mystery Tour. Is that great? Where they're all standing there with masks and things, and those pictures, you see that picture so many times with the white piano and they're all wearing masks and things. It's great.
Regardless of that, you know, the lyrical content is weird but strong, but the musical thing is fantastic. All these sort of slightly odd cellos playing in the background. It's great, you know. Their strength was music.
Singing Hare Krishna, and you should have seen the kick in every round. I am the Eggman. I am the Eggman. I am the walrus.
Hello Goodbye, I think, was something that they put out simply because they had to do a single.
You say yes, I say no. You say stop, and I say go, go, go. Oh no. You say goodbye, and I say hello. Hello, hello. I don't know why you say goodbye. I say hello. Hello, hello. I don't know why you say goodbye. I say hello. I say hi. You say.
I don't think that the words amount to much. I think that the words are just support structures for the melody. I mean, I think that it would have topped the charts regardless. I mean, personally, I think that at that time, if the Beatles had recorded Knees Up Mother Brown, it would have got to #1. And you know, but it would have got to #1 by some sort of thought process. You know, they probably think, well, perhaps they're being really ironic. You know, perhaps if I keep listening to this over and over and over again, you know, something will be revealed. You know, something really important, some sort of life-changing, you know, suggestion, perhaps. I think that it was kind of like a more orthodox Beatles single, but kind of transferred to sort of, you know, the state of the art at the time, whatever was fashionable. I don't think it was a very good song, to be honest.
Why you say goodbye? I say hello. You say yes. I say no. You say
Hello, Goodbye. The best thing about it is the ending, the hey la, hey hello kind of climax, which is absolutely fantastic pop music. That is just great pop and just makes you want to jump up and down and shake everything you've got. Until then, for me, I'm just waiting for that bit to come. I'm kind of treading water for a couple of minutes until you get to that. It's a pop song. It's a great pop song, like you know, even the most average work. But it's all about that crescendo, that climax, which really lifts up a gear and just fills you with kind of adrenaline. Hey Jude is a fantastic sing-along number, perhaps even more so than All You Need Is Love, if that's possible. It was written, I think, about Julian Lennon again by McCartney, and it's such a strong song, and McCartney again deserves perhaps so much more credit than he gets. Because Lennon died and McCartney doesn't, there tends to be this kind of iconic hero worship of Lennon and giving all the credit to him, and because McCartney stayed alive, he doesn't get the kind of the sainthood or the kind of martyrdom that Lennon does. But Hey Jude is a fantastic anthem, I mean, as good as it gets.
1, 2, 3.
Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. Remember to let her into your heart, then you can start to make it better.
I think that the popularity of Hey Jude hangs entirely on the sort of wordless bit at the end. I mean, when Elvis Presley did it, that's all he did. That's all he did. You know, he just sang the end bit of it. And when Paul McCartney did it at the Prince's Trust concert a few years ago, he just did all that da-da bit and everybody joined in.
You'd have to have a heart of stone to be in that audience and not be moved. You know, you can go along with all the cynicism in the world, even now to McCartney gigs, and go, oh God, how corny is this, how cheesy is this? But after a few na-na-nas around you, it's you know, it's hard not to be moved, it really is.
I don't think it would have stood as tall if it hadn't had that bit at the end. I mean, it's a very sort of, you know, catchy sort of thing, in the same way as something like na 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 na, hey hey goodbye. It's all built on repetition. I mean, a lot of pop music is built on repetition, and I think that everything hangs, interestingly enough, on the bit of Hey Jude that hasn't actually got any words in it at all.
Everyone else was having kittens. Oh, how are they going to follow Sgt. Pepper? They didn't care. They just took it on like they took everything else on. Like, took a big breath and just got into it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
about destruction. Don't you know that you can count me out? Don't you know it's gonna be?
Beatles had spent a period in India, and at that point they didn't have the press around them. They weren't being followed by people. They were allowed to be kind of anonymous for a period of time. The Beatles came back to England to start their next album, and they had hundreds of songs.
We don't love to see the blind. You ask me for a contribution. Well, no. We all do what we can.
They followed this lovely, coloured, mad, psychedelic album cover with a white album. Very clever. Then they decided to do a double album. Very clever.
And it sounds like, as well, that they're having fun in places, you know. Like, why don't we do it in the road? It's just stupid track in there, you know, just a bit silly, but it works.
It's basically a solo album for John, Paul, and George, with using the Beatles as a backing group.
It wasn't an album that showed that they were particularly a group working together well, as they had done in the mid-60s. Everything had come up to a peak perhaps with Sgt. Pepper, but with the White Album you were seeing a group basically falling slowly apart.
In a way, pound for pound, probably even better than Sgt. Pepper. But of course, the great Sgt. Pepper will always be hailed. I think Sgt. Pepper is a great album, but I also think the White Album's a great album. It was a fantastic composition and it was a brilliant song, and it was the one that Eric Clapton played the solo on, which we all know, Beatles myth, number 584.
He was in the studio with them, and the reason why apparently George brought him in was the Beatles were bickering a lot amongst themselves. So he thought, hey, I'm going to bring in my buddy Eric Clapton, and all the boys will behave. And apparently that's what they did on that track. All of a sudden they were working more as a unit because somebody else was in the room and they didn't want to show that they weren't getting along.
While My Guitar Gently Weeps is the song everyone was playing when George Harrison died.
When you play that song, immediately you know it's a George song, you know. And I think it does have the enduring qualities to be known as one of George's best songs ever.
But I realise now that what I like about it is Clapton's playing. And that, well, it's Clapton's playing combined with McCartney's bass. And it happens to be a Harrison song, but I don't think that that actually matters for me very much anymore. Shame.
It's just opinion, it's all subjective, isn't it? I think it's a great song, brilliantly executed and beautifully played.
George Harrison developed his own style as a guitar player, and it came from his love originally of country and western players like Chet Atkins and people like that.
There's far too much country guitar coming through in a lot of, well, actually right the way through to sort of 68, 69, which I think is sort of more Harrison's forte.
George was basically there to fill in the bits between John and Paul's singing. So he only had a certain canvas on which he could paint, and in doing so he would try to serve the song rather than create any kind of statement.
George held it back, and that's part of his appeal. You wanted to hear more.
You looked forward to hearing the middle eighth in a song where there'd be a bit of a George Harrison guitar solo in it.
Very understated, but what he played was always really important.
Rather like Ringo was the best drummer for the Beatles, so George was the best guitar player for the Beatles, because they didn't need sort of explosive lead guitar solos. They didn't need a Jimi Hendrix or an Eric Clapton.
Because what you didn't want was somebody who was going to take the focus away from the melody and the lyrics. So he fits into the band perfectly.
And if you look at Clapton and Page, and you add up all the records that they've sold, George has outsold them many, many, many times over. He's the best.
Abbey Road is an unbelievable piece of work. Absolutely, probably close to their best piece of work they've ever made. They were probably at their peak.
I think by the time Abbey Road came out, the Beatles were really looking into sort of what they were going to do when they finished as a band. I think at that point they all envisioned that they would stay together, but they would definitely work on their own projects.
If you listen to the last 3 tracks, which McCartney sings on, probably the best vocals Paul ever did. Ever did. He was just brilliant on it.
He took a whole bunch of unfinished songs, stuck them together, and that one side where it just plays right through is apparently a mishmash of unfinished songs.
Here we have things run on into each other, where it seems as if you're not listening to Polythene Pan and then to Mean Mr. Mustard and then to She Came In Through the Bathroom Window. You're actually listening to one song which goes through these different phases.
And George at this point, he had a lot of different songs that he wanted to release, but he just didn't have the kind of power within the group to get a lot of them onto albums.
And Something, of course, has become a classic, along with, you know, Yesterday, or along with the, you know, Lennon songs. And George Harrison's input into the Beatles, I think, was fantastic and sometimes overlooked.
George Harrison was really coming into his own as a songwriter in this later period. If the split of the Beatles was well timed, sort of flukily for anyone, it was for Harrison, who was just coming to his best strength as a songwriter. And so he came to his own solo career sort of in with full confidence, really.
You know I believe in how somewhere in his smile.
They left the best epitaph to a band they could ever leave. That was probably one of their best records ever, and it was phenomenal.
The last thing, which, you know, could have been, you know, thanks very much everybody, you know, it's been fun, but we're not going to do it anymore. It ended up being a really bitter and nasty divorce.
Don't let me down.
If you're looking at the times of recording, the final Beatles album was really Abbey Road, but Let It Be emerged after Abbey Road as the final release.
Because it took them 3 years to get round to mixing the fucker, because they hated it, because it was just a bad time for them.
When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be.
Let It Be, a beautiful song, about as good a way to go as you could get. If you're going to go out on a high, that's the way to do it. It's almost like a hymn in a way, but not as dull. It's McCartney at his best, and it's from the Let It Be album is often underrated. You know, it's a great album for a sort of patchwork farewell album. And Let It Be, like The Long and Winding Road, is one of the 2 big ballads that have lasted well since and will probably last forevermore. Covered by innumerable occasions. Just very affecting and has that kind of sense of pathos that McCartney injects into his best ballads.
When all the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer, let it be. For though they may be parted, there is still a chance that they will see. There will be an answer, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, yeah, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be. Let it be, let it be.
In a way, I suppose Let It Be was a kind of maybe seen as some sort of valedictory anthem to the Beatles, or perhaps even The Long and Winding Road from the same LP. And it's the sort of thing that, you know, it's got that kind of wearied resignation about it. The only problem I think is that the Let It Be version that everybody knows is actually the one that's been doctored with strings and choir, you know, after Phil Spector was let loose on the album. But I think that a more worthy epitaph for the Beatles was in, you know, what turned out to be the last thing they ever recorded, which was Abbey Road, which, I mean, I suppose that's, I mean, to quote, you know, it's Debussy talking about Wagner's Das Rheingold. It was a glorious sunset mistaken for a dawn.
Obviously that meant that people considered that the Beatles' career ended with Let It Be, and the band themselves weren't happy with that.
Nobody could agree on the mix, and they ended up getting Phil Spector to certainly put the strings on the Long and Winding Road, a McCartney song, which was a bit of a mistake. McCartney hated it and didn't really want it released, but I suppose through a contract with EMI it was released.
Many times I've been alone, and many times I've cried. Anyway, you've always known the many ways I've tried, but still they lead me back to the long, winding road.
So the whole idea behind it, the album Let It Be, and then of course the movie to follow, was the fact that the Beatles wanted to be sort of a get back, and of course one of the songs, Get Back, was to get Beatles get back to their musical roots.
What we always remember about Let It Be the movie is the much copied and parodied audition or performance on top of the Apple building, which was obviously stopped by the police, and John Lennon came out with something like...
I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves, and I hope we pass the audition.
Everyone remembers that, but it was in fact the other footage within the studios that showed the band falling apart. That was one of the first examples of reality television, perhaps.
It's quite difficult to watch because you're watching people having an argument, you're watching a relationship falling apart, you're watching a band falling apart.
Okay, look, I'm not trying to say that. I'm not trying to say that. You're doing it as though I'm trying to say that. And what we said the other day, I'm not trying to get you. But I really am trying to just say, look, lads, the band, should we try it like this,
It's funny that I don't because when Ruby comes
I know it's this one. It's like, should we play guitar all through Hey Jude? Well, I don't think we should.
Yeah, okay, well I don't mind. I'll play, whatever you want me to play, or I won't play at all if you don't want me to play. No, whatever it is that will please you, I'll do it.
A lot of things were left in the movie where other artists would say, no, take that out. So I think the Beatles wanted to show the sort of warts and all sort of thing.
It would have been far better, in fact, had Abbey Road been the final released Beatles album, but fate decreed that it wouldn't be.
But even at the end, the Beatles were still making great records and still producing thoughtful pieces of music, timeless pieces of music.
And it's quite a sad end to what was an absolutely fantastic career.
You and I have memories longer than the road that stretches out ahead. Two of us wearing raincoats, standing so low in the sun. You and me chasing paper, getting nowhere on our way back home. We're on our way home. We're on our way home. We're going home.
I think the Beatles broke a mould that said that pop music is of its time, because for Beatles fans and for pop fans, Beatles music is forever.
When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right
They could rock with the best of them, but they could do a ballad as sweet as anybody.
When all the broken-hearted people living in the world agree.
It's not music you can date either. When you hear a song from the 50s, you immediately think, oh, this is a 50s song. But you can hear a Beatles song today, and it still sounds good and punchy enough that it could have been, written yesterday by a band.
Yeah, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be.
It's amazing to think how much the Beatles achieved in what was really quite a short career. Once they were famous, the pressures of fame kind of broke them, shattered them apart. But in the second half of their career, they were doing this kind of way out there experimental stuff for its time. They really were. They symbolised that kind of 60s, push the envelope, go further. Let's do away with the old society. Let's kind of all, peace and love and flower power and so on. And yet so much of the music is not just sort of hippy-dippy nonsense. There is actually sort of bite and venom to these songs. And they do stand up as songs. You can look at some sort of documents of the time, like sort of Jefferson Airplane or The Doors or so forth. And for many people, I know people will debate this, but for many people they sound so much of their time. A lot of, there's only one or two Doors songs that stand up well as songs to this day. But the Beatles, their songs kind of not only captured the spirit of the times and documented it, but they stood up as songs in their own right, very much so.
It's impossible to sum up the Beatles in one track because, they were so multifaceted. I mean, if, for example, pop music was divided up into categories as jazz is, the Beatles, stood in all classes of that. I mean, they addressed traditional pop in things like, When I'm 64 or Honey Pie, and mainstream in something like Hello Goodbye, or modern in I don't know, Flying or Blue Jay Way, and avant-garde in Revolution 9. So it's very difficult to sort of put together an album that kind of typifies the Beatles. I mean, there was always a constant thread running through, mainly to do with their vocal harmonies, I think. The vocal harmonies are sort of unmistakable, and also the kind of production criteria of George Martin. I don't think they could have had a better producer than him.
Yeah, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be.
They gave a whole generation a meaning, and they gave the whole music industry its start.
The world needed something different, and they came around at the right time.